So how do we get these data into a format that we can use and do analyses with? There are several ways to do it. The easiest way to do it is to go to the Data tab, then Get Data, from File, from Workbook, and navigate to the file that you're currently working in. Make sure you've saved it previously so that these worksheets are saved in there. We'll choose the Import option and select multiple items, and we want to select all three tables to import, to connect to. So when we hit the Load To option here, it's going to ask us, well, what do we want to do? Well, we don't want to load it to a table because we already have the data in a table. We just want to create a connection, and we want to add this data to the data model. So I'll show you what that means after we hit connect here. So it's going to run for a moment, and it's going to be going into the workbook, extracting data, and loading it into the PowerPivot data model. Now, I believe that we already talked about how to make sure that the PowerPivot menu is shown, but I'll just go over that again. File, Options, Add-ins, and we go to COM, Add-ins, Go, and then we just make sure that PowerPivot for Excel is checked here. And again, this only works in Windows. So this is great. We've loaded our tables that we just had as worksheets into the data model. And now we'll go to Manage the Data Model under the PowerPivot menu. And we can see that it's created what looks like a spreadsheet type interface here, although it behaves quite differently than a normal spreadsheet. So you can get more advanced by doing functions and separate formulas and things that you would manipulate this PowerPivot data model table with. But what we're going to do is go into diagram view. And this is setting us up to do the analysis that we want to do. Now, as I mentioned before, that these three tables are actually joined to one another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join the plot table to the cond table via the plot CN value. And now I'm going to join the cond table to the tree table via a column that I created called plot CN cond ID, which is the concatenation of the plot CN and the cond ID. And I'll show you that in a moment. So by doing this, what I've in effect done is I've told the data model how the plot table, the cond table, and the tree table are all connected. So what can I do with this? Well, this is where it gets super useful. We can click the Pivot Table button, and we can add the data to an existing worksheet. And I'll go over here to Sheet 1. Let's see here. Where do I want to do this? On Sheet 1. Put it there. And we'll say OK. And we've put a pivot table here. You might think, oh, well, that's great. What's so special about a pivot table? Well, with this pivot table, you see that it has sort of a strange looking icon here. That's indicative of a database. So we can take advantage of those relationships we just created between the plot, cond, and tree tables, and we could do summaries. For example, we can do a summary of with plot CN as the row variable, and with, let's just say, forest type, for example, as a column variable. And we just want to know how many trees there are in each of the combinations of plot CN and forest type. So we'll just say, how about the count of tree? It could be, you could do the count of anything, but let's just do the count of tree because every row has a tree ID. And this is the sum, which isn't a meaningful thing. So we'll click here, we'll choose value field settings, and we'll do count. So what we've in effect done here is for every row in the plot table that has trees. So for every plot that has trees on it, we've counted up the number of trees in of a given forest type that are on the plot. So in this example, for example, this plot CN, it has 10 trees in forest type 802. And 802 is some sort of a hardwood forest type. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's a hardwood forest type. We can also very quickly say, well, what is the average diameter? Not the sum. Choose average. By forest type or just overall. Average diameter for every plot CN. Now, if you recall, there were 397 or 398 plots. I can't remember which. Here we only have 140 or 139. What we have to do if we want one row for every plot is to do one more thing. And that's if we right-click in this pivot table and we say Pivot Table Options, and under Display, what we want to do is we want to say Show Items with No Data on Rows. And what this does for us is it puts a blank row in for plots where there are no trees. So if we look here, we have 399, which is what we expected. I think it's 397. If we go here and go down to the bottom, we see there's 397 as the count. So what we have done in summary is we've taken the raw relational database tables, where we have one row for each plot, at least one row for every condition, and one row for every tree that is found on the plot or is modeled, and we can talk about that at another time, that sometimes there are trees in here which are not actually measured. This is an oddity of the database. We have taken these three tables. We have, through the data, get data from file, from workbook option, we've imported those into the data model associated with PowerPivot. We can manage that data model. We can look at the PowerPivot data files in this sort of weird spreadsheet interface. And here's that plot CN cond ID I was talking about before. You see we have cond ID and we have plot CN. So I just mashed them together and divided them, divided the two fields with a dash. And I need to create that myself. So we have defined the relationships in the database between the plot table, the cond table, and the tree table. We've added a pivot table based on that data model. And now we can do all kinds of interesting summaries. So, for example, we can say, all right, by species, what is the average diameter of trees by species? We can, divide this up into all of the other, what's average height, crown class. So I will give you one last tip regarding this. You will see in these files that there are a lot of variable names, and you might look at a variable name and be like, what the heck is reserve could? Well, we have a database user guide. So if we know that we're looking at the cond table, in that user guide, you can go to the cond table, the condition table, and you can click on where it says reserve code, which is in here somewhere. There it is. And it will tell you exactly what it is. A code indicating the reserved status of the condition on publicly owned land. Reserved means it's not allowed to, you can't do cutting on it. So a reserved forest means areas like wilderness areas and places like that where they do not allow cutting. It's like protected versus not protected. We also have our database field guide, and I'll give you the links to these in the file, the example file. This is our database, our field user guide. And here we can look up reserved status, and it tells you in a very detailed way what the field crew sees when they make a decision about what to call it. So you have to cleverly use the search tool in these documents to find the variable names you're interested in. So with that, I will wish you good luck, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.